Hi, Threads. Obviously, I'm not there today. I'm in Minneapolis. I'll be officiating Adam's wedding. I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm able to do this because of you being the church, not just coming to church. So just a few announcements. I'm going to do this today. First off, please help be the church. So if you want to help with our audio, visual stuff, or nursery, you can talk to me when you get back on that. Today, Sam and Tegan, and I believe Adam Holty are going to help with that. Please consider being a part of that. Number 2 announcement, we have a cookbook that's being worked on. Ellen Strong and Katie Kramer are going to do that. If you have a recipe that you love or somebody else loves, just share that also. And number 3, leadership team, we're looking for new people on that. So if you remember the church and want to nominate somebody, please do so. And then lastly, it's Father's Day. Thank you so much for being a father and fathering people. Sometimes that's biological, sometimes that's not, because sometimes our biological parents may not necessarily fit the bill, but there are others that father for us. And to honor you, we have donated as a church to a wonderful organization called Welcomed that helps those who are fostered and those who do fostering. I would encourage you to donate also. That's it. Let me start us off in prayer, okay? Father, thank you for my friends and family that are there. I know that they will be declaring how wonderful you are. Help us to do that effectively today. Help us to do it in such a way that we remember and we help others to remember. I pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Let's worship, guys. I will be watching on the video.
Psalms 9 through 20. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. Those who know your name trust in you, for you, Lord, have never forsaken those who seek you. Sing the praises of the Lord enthroned in Zion. Proclaim among the nations what he has done. For he who avenges blood remembers. He does not ignore the cries of the afflicted. Lord, see how my enemies persecute me. Have mercy and lift me up from the gates of death, that I may declare your praises in the gates of daughter Zion, and there rejoice in your salvation. The nations have fallen into the pit they have dug. Their feet are caught in the net that they have hidden. The Lord is known by his acts of justice. The wicked are ensnared by the work of their hands. The wicked go down to the realm of the dead, all the nations that forget God. But God will never forget the needy. The hope of the afflicted will never perish. Arise, Lord. Do not let mortals triumph. Let the nations be judged in your presence. Strike them with terror, Lord. Let the nations know they are only mortal.
When I wrote about the dangerous act of worship, I was writing about the fact that what makes worship dangerous is worship that takes God seriously and therefore puts me and my world in some other location than in the center of the stage. And what makes faithful worship so transformative is that it's dangerous to selfishness, it's dangerous to self-interest, it's dangerous to the idolatries of self, it's dangerous to the small worldness of my own pathetic interests. Or best interests. It just gives me an entirely different life. So it's dangerous to anything like that. It's dangerous to a feeling that the things that matter most are the things that Mark Laverton thinks matter most, as opposed to the things that God says matter most. And that's a very significant change. So I think it's dangerous because to genuinely encounter God is going to be disruptive, and it's going to mean having to live in a new way and with a new agenda, with a different vision, and all those kinds of themes. So I hope that what makes worship dangerous is that, and if that's true, then it means that the church really does become light and salt in the world, that issues in the demonstration of that, living differently, loving differently, caring differently, entering into other people's lives and pain and need differently, and sharing our own as well.
If you guys want to stand up, you can. I don't really know how we're going to do it because we haven't really been doing it in this room, but if you guys want to stand up, you can. We got to figure that out. I'm going to stand. Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to Thee. Take my moments and my days, let them flow in ceaseless praise. Take my hand and let them move at the impulse of Thy love. Take my feet and let them be swift and beautiful for Thee. Take my voice and let me sing, always only for my King. Take my lips and let them be filled with messages from Thee. Take my silver and my gold, not a mite would I withhold. Take my intellect and you, every power as You choose. Here am I, all of me. Take my life, it's all for Thee. Take my will and make it Thine. It shall be no longer mine. Take my heart, it is Thine own. It shall be Thy royal throne. Take my love, my Lord, I pour at Your feet is treasure stored. Take myself and I will be ever only all for Thee. Here am I, all of me. Take my life, it's all for Thee. Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to Thee. Take my moments and my days, let them flow in ceaseless praise. Of our creation,
beyond our galaxy. You are holy, holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, holy. Lord of heaven and earth. Lord of heaven and earth. Light of the world, you step down into darkness. Open my eyes, let me see beauty that makes this heart adore. Hope of a life spent with you. Here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. King of all things, oh so highly exalted, glorious in heaven above. Humbly you came to the earth you created, all for the sake you came for. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. And I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. where we roam, ancient words will guide us home. Ancient words, ever true, changing me, changing you. We have come with open hearts, so let the ancient words impart. Holy words of our faith, handed down to this age, came to us through sacrifice, for we the faithful words of Christ. Holy words, long preserved for our love in this world. Breathes out with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient word impart. Ancient words, ever true, changing me, changing you. We have come with open hearts, oh, let the ancient words impart. Ancient words, ever true, changing me, changing you. We have come with open hearts, oh, let the ancient words impart.
Do you follow Jesus? Why do you follow Jesus?
Yeah. There's so many theological, soteriological theories about what it means to be a Christian, right? So I'm a Christian because I was born into the church. So I got baptized as a baby, and then I became a Christian. Or I'm a Christian because I had a particular experience. And we never really think of, well, not never, but maybe it's rarer to think of Christian, more rare to, or rare. Maybe it's less of an idea that being a follower of Jesus is really what it means to be a Christian, right? The idea of following. You're not in control. You're a disciple. You've yielded your life to another. The person of Jesus is a unique person in history that's different from any other in human history. There's a story and a life and a biography, and then a whole history that goes with this person. And I want to know more of it. I want to know Jesus as the one who not only will return as the triumphant king, but who is also the suffering servant. I want to know Jesus as the child of a Jewish community who understood lament as much as the triumph. I want to know Jesus who is the King of Kings, who is declared such, but also who calls us to live embodied lives. So it's much more complex than I was born into the faith, or I had an emotional experience that led me to the faith, or I signed on to a movement because I like the tenets of the movement, or I have a set of beliefs that I agree with about this movement. But if I'm a follower of Jesus, that makes it a little more complicated, a little more skin in the game, a little more about relationship, a little more sacrifice, a little more choice on my part even. So I think it encompasses maybe a little more robustly and deeply what it means to be a Christian.
1 Samuel 17, 1 through 11, 19 through 23, and 32 through 49. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soko in Judah. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was over 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? I am not a Philistine, and you are not the servants of, am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, I will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. Early in the morning, David left the flock with a shepherd, loaded up and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been a fighting man from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, and put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you could come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground.
Well, good morning. Happy Father's Day. And it's good to be with you. I was thinking as we were worshiping together, it's just as much as we've been apart with all the COVID stuff, it's so nice to be able to worship and sing together and just hear. You know, usually when I'm doing that at home, it's me I'm hearing, and that's not all that pleasant. So it's nice to hear everybody and to enjoy worshiping together. So happy Father's Day. And today we're going to start by looking at something that probably no speaker ever in his right mind should do. And I'm going to ask you to get your phone instead of turn it off or hide it or quiet it or whatever we normally do. But I want you to grab your phone. I'm guessing somewhere on your phone you have a collection of pictures. So go ahead and find that. And you can just look at them for a little bit. And while you're looking at them, I'm going to guess that you're going to notice a few different things. I mean, there's probably a lot of pictures of family, probably a few, like the video we just watched, with fun animal tricks. If you have pets in your house, they usually do some interesting things that create good stories for us, so that when we show our pictures off to whoever we're around, they say, oh, yeah, you got a crazy cat, dog, gerbil, whatever it is. So as you're looking at those pictures, you'll probably also notice some fuzzy ones. And today what we're going to do is just talk about how to make a fuzzy picture, a fuzzy photo, something everybody needs skill in, I'm sure. But we're going to look at how to make a fuzzy photo. In my house, when I was getting ready for today, my wife commented that it was odd that I hadn't raided her kitchen. Because usually, whenever I'm asked to preach, I usually end up stealing things out of her kitchen to use as visual aids. And I didn't this time, so I'm feeling a little bit off. But I found the living room. And so my visual aid today is from our living room. We have a picture that lives in our living room of our nephew. And it is a fuzzy photo. It's the only one I've ever seen framed intentionally. But it's fuzzy for a reason. He was in his first year playing basketball at the Y, and he was having a riot. He didn't know anything about basketball. You could ask the coach. The coach would definitely back us up on this. He was not in line to be the next LeBron James or whoever the next person is after him. So, but he was having fun, and he was working hard and running hard. And we, just on one of our phones, snapped a picture of him bolting down the court, because that's where all of his teammates were going. And he was committed, not looking where he was going, hopefully he didn't run into anybody. But he was passionate about what he was doing. And not too long ago, I was looking in one of our closets, and it was being overrun by pictures. I'm guessing you guys might have similar things. The box that you put your photos that you haven't sorted or dealt with or whatever. And you know, it's crawling all over the place. It's so full anymore. So for a date night, Loretta and I decided we'd put together a photo album. And we'd rummage through it. You know, it's not one of these, what is that, creative memories or something? It's not one of those fancy schmancy things. It's just, you know, us putting a bunch of pictures in a cheap album we got from the, you know, the local store here. But it just helped relieve some of the volume in there. And we had a great time because we were able to relive those memories and go back through them. And, you know, as I'm looking through here, there's not a lot of fuzzy photos. There's a few, but not a lot. So today we're going to talk about how to make a fuzzy photo. And just for our discussion, we're going to kind of lump fuzzy photos into kind of 4 categories. There's your fuzzy photos that are done on purpose because the person you're taking the picture of or event is in motion. You know it's going to be fuzzy, you take it anyways because that's the way you want the picture to be. You know, we were excited to remember his enthusiasm. We don't care that the photo is fuzzy. The enthusiasm is what we're remembering. So we live with the fuzzy photo. We're fine with it. Or else we wouldn't have framed it probably. So, I mean, there's those kind of photos where you know it's going to be fuzzy and you're totally fine with that. Then there's the other kind where the photo starts off fine. It's a normal, regular picture. You got your family or your event or whatever it is that you took your picture of. But then somewhere along the line, it got a hold of by the dog or the cat or the refrigerator, and it fell in something in there and stuck to the milk carton and got some of the ink pulled off. Or it got lost under the couch at some point, and when you found it again, it had been clobbered by dust bunnies. It's the photo that gets destroyed. It started off fine, but it turned fuzzy because life happened to it, and life jumped all over its case. It's the one that's crumbled. It's the one that was chewed on by a child. It's the one that was, I could come up with 100 stories, and I bet you could come up with ones that are better because you've had photos that have lived it. It's the photo that becomes fuzzy. So that's a kind of a second category. It started off fine, but then life happened to it, and it's not nearly the glory of its former self. And then there's the kind of two other categories. There's the famous, let me take a picture, and let's see, there's my shutter, and I do this number. I'm sure none of you guys have ever taken pictures like that, where you get a great picture of the scenery over here, and then a third of the picture is a beautiful shot of the back of your thumb or finger, or however you happen to hold it. I'm sure I'm the only one that has a few of those floating around on my photo thing. So there's the human error fuzzy photos, the ones where it's just, I don't know how to use my equipment. I drop my finger in there, I'm shaking while I'm doing it, all that kind of stuff. So it's fuzzy, and I know whose fault it is. It's mine. I got nobody to blame. I could, but it's not going to hold up, and everybody knows it. And then there's a fourth one. The fourth one is kind of the equipment issue. So most of us are taking pictures these days with our phones instead of cameras and other equipment of that nature. So this is I dropped my phone in the mud puddle, wiped it off quickly so I could take the picture that I want to take, but I never got the lens cleared off very well. So all of a sudden, my photo has all this smudge all over it. It's not that the scenery turned all smudgy, it's just there was an issue with my camera, my phone, whatever, or I didn't know how to take care of it, that kind of thing. So those are kind of the big camps of how to make what kind of fuzzy photos are out there. So today we're going to just look at how to make some, because I'm sure everybody wants more fuzzy photos to clutter up your phone with. And as we're talking about photos, I want to just kind of take a second and say, well, why do we even take photos? I mean, why do we go to all this trouble? I mean, some people are more passionate about it than others. We've got some friends that they take pictures of everything. Loretta and I were barely lucky if we remember, oh yeah, it's a graduation, we got to take a picture of this. So we get 2 pictures out of the deal and we call it, all right, we did good. Other people have, 70,000 of the same type of an event in their family. So, all of us are different on how photo crazy we are. But why do we even go to the trouble of attempting pictures? Well, as I was thinking about it, it seems to me that usually what we're trying to do is we're trying to remember something, or we're thinking we want to pass it on. So my wife and I, Loretta and I, we went this last weekend. We were celebrating her birthday and our anniversary. And so we went away for the weekend, and we went to this place in Milwaukee that was a bed and breakfast. It had a German heritage in its history. It was originally built by some German guy for his kids or something like that. There's a whole story. You could look it up. But they have pictures all over the staircases and things like that of probably like wedding photo type things, that kind of a age in their life, but they all look the same. And it was funny to me because it was a German heritage thing, and I have a German heritage. So I remember in my house growing up that we had, I think it was the same photographer. They all looked alike, that kind of a brownish gray. Everybody looks very sour, but it's supposed to be a happy photo, I imagine, but they all looked same. I mean, I know they're different people, but they look the same. And so they either stole the pictures from my house or they had that same photographer, and they're all over the place. And, they want to pass that on. They want to be able to tell the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren and the whatever that this was so-and-so and so-and-so, and here's how they met, and here's what they did. I remember my mom telling me that when her grandfathers would get together every Friday, because that was an easy day in their farming week, and they would sit on the front porch and tell the same stories and sell the same horse every week. And I don't know if they just didn't get tired of the story, but they did that to pass it on. And she remembered it, and then she tells me, so now I can remember it. I can bless my children with the story too, so they can pass it on to their kids and excite them about the same horse being sold every week. So we want to pass those things on to give them to our next generation. And as we look in the Bible, the cool thing about the Bible, and for those of you that don't know me, I used to be a children's pastor for years and years and years. So when I look at the Bible, I'm looking at it usually through the mental image of how do I communicate this to kids? And the nice thing about the Bible is it does a lot of, whereas in the New Testament you get a lot of the teaching stuff, here's what you do, here's what you don't do. God also backfilled all the Old Testament with usually the story to illustrate what he was teaching. So if you're looking for, something in Ephesians, you want to find the story to go along with it, it's probably in there somewhere. You just got to look into the Old Testament or earlier in the Gospels and things like that. And there's the story, the picture to go along with the teaching. And the Bible is full of photos. The nice thing about the Bible is that it's not an art museum photo album. Not one of those that all the pictures are perfect and they're all pristine and they're all crystal clear. When God put together the stories that he puts in the Bible, he made them fuzzy, which is incredibly helpful. Because on one side, you would hope, I hope everything would be perfect and crystal clear, and that would be just amazing. But the problem is, there's the human element. The fuzzy photos in the Bible are there not because God doesn't know how to work his equipment, or that he gets his thumb in front of the picture, or that his dog got a hold of the picture. It's because of the human element. All those ways that we talked about how we make fuzzy photos, usually the culprit comes no further than me. I'm the one that knocked it off the place where it was supposed to be and it fell on the floor where the animals and the kids could tear it up. I'm the one that had my thumb in front of the picture. I'm the one that dropped my phone in the mud puddle. It's usually me that's creating the fuzzy in the fuzzy photo. The world didn't go fuzzy that moment. It's operator error on my end. And as we look in the Bible, we see a lot of fuzzy photos, and we see how God can work with those. And we're going to look at a fuzzy photo from the pages of the Old Testament today. It's in Exodus 32. But before we look at Exodus 32, I think there might be part of the passage there in your bulletin. But we want to get the panorama. It's my big word for photography class today, of the whole shot. So we're going to look at Exodus 24 to 31. Promise you we're not going to read a lot of it, and we're not going to spend a lot of time there. But we do want to look at it, because it helps to tell the story of the photo we're going to look at in 32. So to look at this big picture story, we need to know what's going on. So if you don't have your history of Israel readily available, know that the family of Abraham moved down to Egypt. They lived there for 400 years. They grew and grew and grew, became a danger to the Egyptians, at least in the Egyptians' mind, and the Egyptians turned them into slaves. They were treated harshly. It was very poor conditions for them, and God heard them crying out for help, and after 400 years, he set up his plan to rescue them, to pull them out. So Moses pops onto the scene. So you probably heard some stories of Moses and how his miraculous childhood, and now he's an adult, and now he is in charge, leading the people out. So his job was to get the people from Egypt to the Promised Land. Now remember, when the people went to Egypt, they were just a family, just a handful of people. Now they're going out in a huge group. But they've been slaves, and they've been mistreated, and they have no identity of their own that they've established. So God recognizes this. He sees this, and if you ever look, if you have one of those Bibles that has the maps in it, if you ever look at one of those maps and the path that they usually have, one that shows the way from Egypt to the Promised Land, and it looks like you could go pretty straight shot and get there pretty quick. But then the way they go is like they go this way, and then they get in trouble, and they do the whole 40 years in the wilderness, so they wander all over the place, and then they finally sneak in over here. And you say, well, wow, you know, their Garmin was way off base. They didn't know what the world they were going. No, it wasn't that. It's that God knew that they needed some time, some downtime between point A and point B to collect themselves, to get it together. So he kind of detours them off. They go to Mount Sinai, this place out in the wilderness, plenty of space for them to be, and away from the distractions of the Promised Land. Because if you remember the stories of the Promised Land, or at least the VeggieTales song about it, it's a land flowing with milk and honey, and they're big, and they're giants, and they're huge pickles everywhere, and it's just crazy. So before they get there, God knew they needed some time to get their act together. So he pulls them aside. They're at the base of Mount Sinai. Moses goes up the mountain. He's up there for 40 days, so a little over a month. He's up there getting instructions from God, and that's what you see in Exodus 24 to 31. It's the long list of how God wants to organize things. So he gives instructions on how to build the tabernacle, what goes in the tabernacle, what the priests are supposed to wear, what their jobs are supposed to be, lots of details. And it's a good thing, because what was God doing? He was helping them establish two things. He wanted them to make sure that they knew that there was a way for them as individuals to connect with him. God was telling them, all right, here's how you're going to interact with me. I'm going to give you a place. We call it the tabernacle. This is where you're going to go. He gave them furniture in there. You know, some of it for offerings and sacrifices, some of it to hold, you know, a couple of special elements that he was going to put in there. And so it had like a table, so a place for them to interact. And say, all right, here's where you go. Here's how you're going to connect with me. And then he also had a candlestick in there, which, you know, for practical reasons is so they could see. But it's also a hint at what he wanted them to do. He says, I got a job for you to do. You're to be a light to the nations. And we usually see that in the New Testament, but that started in the Old Testament, where he wanted them, the people of Israel, to be a testimony to who God was. Because originally he set it up where he was basically the king. They call it a theocracy if you want to use big technical jargon about it. But he was setting it up where he was going to be in charge and they were going to follow him. That was going to be a testimony to the nations around them, who were being ruled by human kings and all the craziness that can go with a human king. So he was telling them, I want you to be a testimony. I want you to be a light. So in 24 to 31, he gives the picture of what he wants. And the picture is clear at this point because God knows how to work his equipment. He knows what he's doing. And when he takes a photo, it's a clear, good photo. Then we get to the other side of this story. And that's what happens when we jump into Exodus 32. So if you want to read along, I'm going to read just the first couple of verses in the chapter. It says, Now when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people assembled about Aaron and said to him, Come, make us a god who will go before us. For this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And Aaron said to them, Tear off the gold rings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me. Then all the people tore off the gold rings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he took this from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made it into a molten calf. And they said, This is your God, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. Now when Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." So the next day they rose early and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. So while God is giving Moses the crystal clear picture, here's where the photo gets fuzzy. The people got involved. They got tired of waiting. They got bored. They got something. So they get this idea and they go to Aaron, the guy that was left in charge, and says, "Hey, we don't know what happened to Moses. We need something to identify us." So what started off as a foolish idea quickly became, all right, let's gather up some gold, let's make this thing. Aaron makes it into this little golden calf deal. Someone gets the bright idea, hey, let's worship it. So now we've moved from a foolish idea to idolatry, and it just keeps going from bad to worse. So they set up some celebrations, they have their event, they offer sacrifices, they create this idea that we need to have a big party. Well, then they move from idolatry to immorality. And it just keeps going downhill. Now, I'm not trying to label the badness of any of those. They're all bad in and of themselves. But when you get to the immorality part, now you're taking it out into the public. You know, we can have idolatry in our hearts and we can hide it a little bit. You know, if I worship money, I can keep that to myself at least a little bit. You're going to notice it quickly enough by the way I spend and the way I do and things like that. So, I mean, it's not going to hide long. But in the beginning stages, you can be all proper about it and not let the world know what's going on in your heart. When you get to the immorality, everybody knows. The party has gone public. So it's gone from what started off as a foolish idea to a worse idea, to a worse idea, and now it's pulling in others, and everybody seems to be involved in this crazy nonsense. So while this is all going on, God and Moses are interacting up on the mountain. God says, you need to look at these people that you brought out of the land of Egypt. And you begin a discussion in verse 7 on to the next few verses there of God talking with Moses and basically saying, just get out of my way for a minute and I'm going to fix this. And, you know, God has the power and the authority. He could fix it really quickly. You know, he could wipe them off the face of the earth. He could do all sorts of, you know, big, mean type things, which would be totally deserved. We sang this morning about how holy God is. Well, that didn't start with Jesus. That started way back with Adam and Eve and eons before that. He's been holy the whole time. So this act of theirs, 40 days after they had set up camp in Sinai, they had a big celebration saying, God, we're going to go where you want us to go. We're going to do what you want us to do. You know, big celebratory moment. And now 40 days later, the wheels are off the wagon. They're worshiping a golden calf and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. So it didn't take long for it to fall apart. The photo got fuzzy quickly. And here it is, in the midst of all this chaos and craziness, God and Moses are talking. And Moses is standing up for the people saying, please, God, give them a chance. And ends up that he reminds God of the promises he's made. It's not because God forgot. He just was giving Moses a chance to be a leader. And Moses led. And he did what he should do. And he stood up for the people and spoke on their behalf before God. God relented. Moses comes down off the mountain. When he sees what's going on with his own eyes, he goes ballistic. And he's carrying the 10 Commandments, the original version that God had written, and he throws them on the ground, symbolizing the breaking of all those laws and those commands that God had given. He goes up to the golden calf and the altar and the thing that's there with it. He burns it, he crushes it, he makes it into a fine powder, pours it on the water. And that's the first Kool-Aid that's ever mentioned in the Bible. So the people get to drink this stuff. And I imagine it didn't come with a cup full of sugar, like the Kool-Aid packets that I had when I was a kid. And here it is, they're drinking, and I'm sure it was bitter. And, well, it was a bitter thing that they had done, so it fit the crime. And Moses reacted, and then as you go through the rest of the chapter, you also see some of the interactions with the Levites, how they jump in and were willing to follow God and to do some difficult things that needed to happen. And then in chapter 33 and 34, you see God beginning to work through the consequences. He says, all right, because of what you guys have done, I can't stay in the midst of you right now, because I'll just wipe you out. And they understood. They had done something terrible. So they work out the plan so that he can be out he'll meet with Moses in a tent outside the camp kind of thing. So they work out the situation. They work through the consequences. And then one of the greatest things that happens in this whole picture, in 24 to 31, God's given the crystal clear picture. 32, the wheels fall off the wagon, the photo gets all fuzzy. 33 and 34, you see God putting it back together. But then in chapter 35, if you have one of those Bibles that has the little headings in there to help you kind of stay on track with where the passage is going, you're going to see a lot of building language. They start building this. They start making that. This person gets involved in creating something. He gets them going again. He says, here's what you need to do. And he gets them building. So as the people of Israel were getting ready for their Kodak moment, they royally messed it up. I mean, they botched it big time. Here was God with this crystal clear picture of what he wanted from them, a plan for them to have a place to meet with him, a way to connect with him, a job and a task to do, to be a light to the world, and they're going around worshiping golden calves. Totally messing up the plan. But what's exciting is that Exodus 35 is there. When God writes the stories and the pictures that he gives us in the Bible, he doesn't just give us how everything went right, but how he puts it back together after it's gone wrong. And I don't know about your lives, but my life, I've seen plenty of where things didn't go the way I wanted them to. Either because of mistakes that I've made or because of just life happens. When we take photos, we're usually taking photos of happy events, of the graduations, the births, the weddings, the birthday parties, the things that we can plan and organize. But if you notice, we don't usually take a lot of pictures of when things are very, very challenging and when things are going wrong. One is I don't think we want to have a visual reminder of how wrong things are going. When I was a teenager, I had cancer. I can't find a picture anywhere in my possession of me at that age. I'm sure if I rummaged through my parents, I might find one or two. But I don't want any pictures of that. I know I looked like a train wreck. It was a rough time. But the thing about those moments in our lives, those challenging moments, is even though we don't take the picture, we really are the picture. We may not create them with pixels or pigments or paper, but they're etched into our hearts and in our lives through the tears and the anguish that we live with. And they become a part of who we are, and they change who we are. I wouldn't be here today if cancer hadn't been a part of my story as a teenager. I know that. I did not grow up wanting to be a children's pastor or work at Quick Trip or any of the other things that I've done. None of those were on my childhood, dream list. But those are places that God has brought me. And I know that it all stems back to that time when something difficult happened in life, because I'm sure you guys have seen it in your lives too, that it's in those difficult, challenging times when God really gets our attention. As a pastor, it's great to be involved with weddings because they're fun. But if you really want people to hear what you're saying, you agree to be a participant in a funeral. Because at funerals, Everybody is hurting. They don't put up guards. They don't make happy faces. They're in pain, and they let you know it. And they're not holding anything back from you. You want to see real people? You go to funerals. You want to see happy people? You go to weddings, because everybody's happy. It's a great occasion. It's a fun event. We learn a lot through those difficult days and through those difficult times where the pictures are really a part of our lives. So like when the people of Israel were getting ready to burn the golden calf, I'm sure nobody jumped up and said, hey, let me get a picture of this real quick. And let me take a picture of the drink after it was all ground up. No, they didn't need to, because that was a part of who they were now. And just like in our lives, there are those dark times when things become a part of who we are and change how we face things, how we deal with things. But the good news still is Exodus 35. That God doesn't stop the picture where it's at the darkest. Yes, there's going to be consequences. God will work through those. God's pictures and God's plans weren't destroyed at the end of chapter 31 when his crystal clear picture became fuzzy. The amazing thing about God is that he reaches around that and he pulls in that fuzzy, that human element that finds a way to make things fuzzy in all sorts of different ways. Some good, some just life, some poor choices, some sin, all that stuff. He pulls it, wraps it right around into his bigger picture, in his bigger plan. And when you get to Exodus 35, you see God saying, let's build. Let's make something. And God helps him set up a nation that would then be ready to go into the promised land in 40 years. A nation that would, have, David and Solomon build the great temples and do all sorts of amazing things, set things up so that when Jesus came, it would be just the right time and place and the right people to provide salvation for a world. He worked through this family, even though they had this knack for making fuzzy photos. And while we may not be looking to increase our stock of fuzzy photos in our photo albums and in our life, there's a couple of lessons that I hope we can take away from this picture that we saw in the life of the people of Israel. And one is the obvious one, kind of out there. It's like, well, obviously, work hard at trying to get rid of the fuzzy photos. The ones that we can eliminate, let's try to eliminate. Let's try not to be doing sinful things and bad things and wrong things in our life, of course. But there's also the ones that we embrace. So embrace the ones that you have. Go ahead and frame a fuzzy photo or two. It's okay. Your house will be fine. And there are some that you want, that you can fix things, Like I held up my phone earlier, after I got my thumb out, get your thumb out of the way, wipe off the lens, all those kind of things that we can do. So the obvious is just, fix what you can fix, embrace what you can embrace, and try to eliminate the ones that you want to eliminate, the wrong stuff. And then beyond that, there's also a practical one. If you look in chapters 33 and 34, as God is dealing with the consequences of what's gone on in this situation, he's encouraging him to keep busy, to get going. If you look in chapter 32, there are a huge number of active words. Not all of them are good active words, but their activity is at least a step in the right direction, that they're moving. So keep moving. Just keep working at doing what you're doing. Be the best dad you can be a good worker for the company that you work for or for the situation that you have at home. If you're a student, be a good student. Just keep moving. That's kind of the big thing. And then there's a hopeful one. If you're stuck in a place that is one of those dark, challenging spots in life, an Exodus 32 kind of a place, know that, there may be some consequences that you'll have to deal with, but there's an Exodus 35 out there that God wants to get you going again. Find a starting line where you can take another photo and say, here's the line we crossed. You know, it's not a picture that I take, but a day that I always remember is April 15th. It's not because that's the day our taxes are due, although that is a good reminder for that. April 15th was the last day I had radiation treatments for the cancer I had as a teenager. I never have to be reminded of what that day means in my life, every year. And that was 30-ish years ago. I still remember that date. Because for me, it was a new start. That, okay, we finished one chapter, we're moving on to something else. Find new starts. Even if you're going through the dark stuff, find the new starts, those starting lines. Take a picture and move on. And then one last practical, hopefully super simple one to do. I want to encourage you, gather your family around sometime today or this week. Take a picture. Doesn't matter if it's fuzzy or not, take a picture. We do those things so that we remember where God has brought us. Don't forget. Remember where he's brought you, what he's done. And if you look at your life and you say, well, I don't know that I can see anything like that. Well, take the picture anyways and say, today is when I'm going to start looking. And I want to see what he's going to do. He won't disappoint you. He'll find a way to work in your life and in your heart and do the things that he needs to do. Sometimes he signs it in a big way. Other times he's real quiet. But he does work in our hearts and our lives. And as we look at Father's Day, it's a great reminder to just celebrate where God has brought us as individuals, as families, as a nation, because he's still reaching around all that fuzziness that we can create in our own lives. He reaches around that. It doesn't scare him away. You think of that big bear hug that you probably got from a grandfather when you were a kid. You know, it seemed like his arms were forever big. Well, when you're this tall, you know, they do seem that way. But he just reaches around it. And that's the way God is. No matter how crazy and off track things have gotten, it's not too big where he can't reach around it and get us back going again. So as we look at the story, doesn't matter how fuzzy the photo is, just keep moving and let God pull it back together for you. All right, let's pray, and then we're going to finish up with the doxology if Eric will help lead that for us. God, we thank you that no matter how fuzzy we can make things in our lives, and we can do some doozy of fuzziness making, Lord, that you can reach around that, and that you can pull it all back together. Lord, we pray that today, as we think of our fathers and we celebrate with our families, that you would give us time to remember what you have done for us and to make that new start, if that's what we need, to move forward. Help us to keep moving and keep doing what you have us to do. And we celebrate who you are and rejoice in your goodness to us. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, let's close with a doxology.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above the heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy